Chris Suero and Nick Morabito are tearing the cover off the ball in the Arizona Fall League, and Christian Scott is well on his way to making a healthy return in 2026.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've covered the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the number one daily podcast of the New York Mets. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. Well, we're going to go through some minor league news today by giving you an update on the Arizona Fall League, but also a little bit of MLB news. The Mets have made a signing for their big league roster. Dickie Lovelady's coming back. Now, I think a lot of people saw the news and said, wait a minute. Why are the Mets giving a major league deal to Richard Lovelady when he did not pitch very well when he was actually up at the big league level in 2025? Did a good job when he was in Syracuse. But the reason why the Mets are making this signing is because I would bet a pretty large amount of money that this is a split contract, which means that if Dickie Lovelady earns a job through spring training and makes the bullpen, he could be on the MLB roster, or you can just stash him in Syracuse. I don't think that this means that he is guaranteed a spot on the 40 and, more prominently on the active roster. But I did want to address that on the front end of the podcast before I forgot to mention it later on. Now let's talk about the Arizona Fall League. The New York Mets sent 6 players to the Fall League, 3 pitchers and 3 hitters. When it comes to the pitchers, there's nobody that's very notable of this bunch. You had Brett Banks, who is a reliever, 24 years old, still has not pitched above high A. He spent this past season in low A and high A, so I think this is just a matter of getting him some working in some tougher competition. He did pitch well in those levels in the ERA in the low 2s, but so far in the Arizona Fall League, 4 games, 4 innings pitched. He's allowed 4 runs on 6 hits and 2 walks. He does have 8 strikeouts. Bryce Jenkins, another pitcher that was sent to the Fall League, who is really just still rehabbing, essentially. He missed all of the 2024 season, most of this past season as he recovered from Tommy John surgery. So I think it's just a matter of getting him some work, but so far he has gotten rocked, a 14.73 ERA up to this point. And you have Austin Trosser, the other pitcher that they sent to the Fall League, who has a 3.86 ERA and 4 2/3 innings pitched. He's 23 years old, pitched 15 innings in high A this past season. So again, a guy that they're probably just trying to get a little bit of extra work. So there was no top flight pitching prospects the Mets sent to the Fall League this year. On the hitting side, 3 much more intriguing prospects. DeAndre Smith is the one that is struggling right now. He's hitting a $185 in 8 games with a 649 OPS, 6 stolen bases, which is pretty good. But he's coming off a year where he hit 282 between high A and double A, with the majority of that being in double A. He stole 24 bases. He hit 7 home runs, played some second base, played some outfield. He is Rule 5 draft eligible, although I think it would be pretty shocking for him to get selected. But a prospect the Mets were maybe trying to challenge and see what it would look like in the Fall League, and so far has not looked good for Smith. But that brings us to the 2 prospects that we're really going to spend a lot of time on today, Nick Morabito and Chris Suero. These are guys that I think are right now probably somewhere in the 15 to 20 range in the Mets farm system. I know in yesterday's show, I said I might do a look into the top 20 prospects in this system. I need to really take my time on that. I've started to gather my list. I'm starting to narrow it down to 20, but it's going to take some time. I do believe that both Morabito and Suero will be on the top 20 prospect list, I think comfortably within the top 20 prospects. These are guys that are coming off good seasons. Morabito had a much better 2024 season when he was, I believe, the hitter of the year for the Mets. Just was unbelievable going through Port St. Lucie in particular, where he hit, what was Nick Morabito's stats in 2024? He hit In low A, 397, and then he got up to high A and hit 294. This past season, it was all in double A, and he had a good season, but now he is off to a great start in the Arizona Fall League. He's hitting 387, 486 on base, and a 484 slug. Now, on a show the other day, I was talking about Nick Morabito as a potential trade piece. And I mentioned that he had 2 home runs in the Arizona Fall League, and I was a little surprised by that because Nick Morabito does not have a lot of power. I misread the stat. It was 2 RBIs at the time. Now he has 3, and that's where I was able to catch on today. I was like, 3 home runs, and then I looked closer. I'm like, no, that was RBI. So he is not hitting for much power in the Arizona Fall League, which he typically doesn't. This is a guy that had that incredible 2024 season. I wouldn't say that it's just due to the defense that he was facing, but I think for a guy like Morabito, when you see him hitting again in low A close to 400, it's because you have pretty bad infields, and this guy has a ton of speed, so he's able to get those extra infield hits because you have shortstops, third basemen who just aren't able to make the plays on the speedy Morabito. As he levels up, gets into double A competition, we saw this past year, a little bit more difficult to hit to such a high average. But still, this is a prospect that has real fourth outfielder potential is the way I'd really look at Nick Morabito. And we'll talk about him more and how he fits in the next segment. But so far in the Arizona Fall League, he's hitting for a high average. He's showcasing that speed. Again, 8 stolen bases on 9 attempts. Sure, he's playing good defense in center field. And you're kind of showcasing him a little bit because he is Rule 5 draft eligible. Now, they're not showcasing him to get selected in the Rule 5 draft, but you could trade him prior to the Rule 5 draft. And I think what you're seeing in the Arizona Fall League is a guy that, definitely has enough tools that he should find his way to the big leagues. Will he actually be a starter in the big leagues? I think it might be a little more unlikely. I think AJ Ewing has a little more potential in that regard. But again, we're going to talk about where Morabito and Suero fit into the Mets system in the next segment. But now going over the numbers for Chris Suero, he has showcased some power in the AFL so far. 3 home runs in 8 games, has 8 RBIs, 4 stolen bases, hitting 276, 344 on base, 621 slug. Suero is a very interesting prospect for the New York Mets because he is a catcher. So he gives you a very interesting dynamic because he's a catcher with speed. Stole more bases in the minor leagues this year than any other catcher. 35 stolen bases. The Mets have played him in left. They tried him over at first base. So there's some versatility there for Suero that I think is really intriguing. He is not Rule 5 draft eligible this winter. That'll come next winter. So the Mets don't have to worry about that. But this is a prospect that has a lot of intriguing tools that could be a very interesting piece of their future where you could have a guy that can be on your bench catching, playing some left, playing some first base, bringing you some speed off the bench. There's a lot that Chris Suero can do. And I want to talk about how Suero and Morabito fit into this system and maybe fit into the Mets' future plans. So we're going to go through all of that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet Go Long. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra and Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. This isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. And the process is simple. You're going to connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment will ship discreetly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to Rugiet.com. That's Rugiet.com. And use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's Rugiet, Rugiet.com. Promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know that we sent you. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. We're getting closer and closer. Really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Now, when we look at the Mets farm system right now, I think there is probably 6 position players that, in my eyes, stand out above all of the rest. Obviously, the two that we've been talking about who could impact the big league roster in this upcoming season, and that's Carson Bench and Jet Williams. Those guys are no doubt about it, top 100 prospects, and honestly, they're getting to the point where they're going to be absolutely consensus top 50 prospects, if not consensus top 30 prospects in baseball. So that is the cream of the crop in the Mets farm system. Ryan Clifford and Jacob Reimer, I've talked about a lot lately when we're doing these shows mocking trades, because these are guys who are either on top 100 lists or they're fringe top 100 who bring some big power to the plate. And so you got Clifford at first base. Most likely he could potentially play a corner outfield spot. Jacob Reimer, you're hoping he can stick at third. Those guys to me are that tier below Jet and Bench. And AJ Ewing is very close to those guys, if not in that tier with Clifford and Reimer. Ewing is, again, a guy that I think was going to start to show up on some top 100 prospect lists. He could be theoretically your center fielder of the future. Stole 70 bases this past season. Also, he is an interesting prospect to me because he is the comp pick the Mets got for Jacob deGrom signing for the Rangers. So a little extra reason to root for him. That to me right now is the five guys that going into the upcoming season are, if not top 100 talents, they're right around there. They're probably maybe top 150. If you extended that far, you should get Clifford, Reimer, and Ewing on pretty much everybody's list. So those are really the bedrock of the Mets farm system right now when it comes to position player prospects. And then Elian Pena, we're going to see how scouts like him when he comes stateside, but he had a great first season in the Dominican Summer League. He got a huge bonus down with the Mets, biggest bonus they've ever given a prospect. So he is also, I think, belonging among that top tier rank of Mets prospects. And then you fill out a top 10 with the three pitchers that we saw down the stretch. You have Jack Winter, you have Jonathan Santucci below them. So there is a very deep top 10 to top 15 prospects in this system. A couple of guys who I'm kind of struggling where to put them within those ranks are Nick Morabito and Chris Suero, who are giving us some more things to process here in the Arizona Fall League. If you look at where these guys are at, they are both uber athletic prospects who are still super young, playing in the upper levels of the system. For Morabito, he just spent the entire season in AA. He's 22 years old. He'll turn 23 next May. Now, Morabito in 2024 again, 24 games spent in low A, hit 397, had a 530 on base. Got up to high A, played 95 games, hit 294, 373 on base. 374 slug shows you the lack of power in his game. Last year in 2024, he stole 59 bases. This year, playing in AA, that stolen base number dropped down to 49, and it was 49 stolen bases on 60 attempts. So you'd like him to get a little more efficient on stealing bases. But for his first season in AA across 118 games, he hit 273, 348 on base, 385 slug. Not a lot of power, only 6 home runs. If you look at the doubles, he had 27 doubles in AA, which is an improvement for him because in 2024, across one more game played, he only had 17 doubles and 4 home runs. He did have 5 triples, but add them all up, what is that? That's 26 extra base hits in 2024. And then this past season, he had 35 extra base hits. So he did improve a little bit in that regard. But the fact that he was able to manage a 270 average against AA competition, that's nothing to sneeze at. Now, again, he is Rule 5 draft eligible. And so I do think that the Mets might have to add him to their 40-man roster because there are other teams out there that might say, you know what? Let's draft Nick Morabito if you're the White Sox or the Rockies. What's the harm in drafting Nick Morabito, sticking him on your bench all year as a 4th outfielder, and then you get a prospect? So I do wonder how the Mets play it. They have a good read on these things. Last year, I can't even remember who it was, but there was a pitching prospect that I was very surprised the Mets did not protect. I'm drawing a blank on who it was, but whoever that prospect was, they did not get selected. So I think David Stearns has a good pulse on who you don't want to lose in the Rule 5 draft. Granted, they lost Mike Vassell, and Vassell had a great first season with the White Sox. So I guess maybe I shouldn't be praising him too much on that front. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Morabito, whether he's added to the 40, whether they roll the dice and see if they can squeeze him through the Rule 5 draft. And granted, he has to stay on that roster all season for the team that's selecting him. If not, then he could be returned to the Mets at some point during the season as well. So it doesn't mean for sure you lose the player, but I think it was interesting that the Mets sent him out to the Arizona Fall League because it's giving all these other teams to get a look at him. But like I mentioned, that could make him an intriguing piece or a more intriguing piece in trade talks. Maybe if you pull off a Freddie Peralta trade, you can get the job done, and Nick Morabito is part of that package. I think what is interesting about Morabito is he gives you a center fielder in the system that can handle the position, that could come out to the big leagues and fill a fourth outfielder role on the cheap for a long time. And that is something that holds a lot of value. But I think that the ceiling might be a little bit limited compared to AJ Ewing, who has a much higher ceiling at this stage. At least it seems that way. Someone who maybe could be a regular in the big leagues. But Morabito, just because I don't necessarily view starting center fielder in his future, fourth outfielder is still a big league outcome, and that's a good one for Morabito. So good start for him in the fall league, doing what he does best, hitting for a high average, getting on base, and then stealing bases. Now, Chris Suero is a really interesting prospect because of the versatility, and also he is only 21 years old. He's going to turn 22 in January. Born in 2004. Man, am I old. Chris Suero, this past season, had a great start to the year in high A. If I remember too, he came out like a cannon. He just shot out the gates. Overall, in 74 games played in high A, he hit 240 with a 382 on base, a 455 slug, 13 homers, stole 25 bases, drove in 51 runs, had a 154 WRC plus. So that is weighted runs created plus, measuring him on a league average of 100. A 154 WRC plus means he was 54% better than the league average hitter in high A. Really good runs for him. Also, he walked at a 13.6% clip. Did strike out a bunch, 28.6% of the time. But overall, really good numbers for Suero. Comes with the double A in 41 games. He struggled a little bit. The power completely fell off a cliff. Slug went from 455 to 324. Only 3 home runs in those 41 games. But he hit 2 home runs in the playoffs, which is pretty nice that he was able to step up when it mattered most. And he walked 16.7% of the time in double A. Struck out 30% of the time. But that does show you a pretty good approach and an ability to get on base, and he's able to leverage that in the stolen base department. 10 stolen bases in 41 games in double A to come to that season total of 35 stolen bases. And when it comes to caught stealings, he was caught 7 times in high A, only once in double A. So 35 stolen bases on 43 attempts. Now, also, like I mentioned, there's positional flexibility. This is a guy who was a catcher, or is a catcher, but played a little bit all over. So this past season, when it comes to catching, he had 46 games caught in high A, 27 games caught in double A. Now, when you look at first base, he started 12 games in high A at first, 4 games at first in double A, and then in the outfield, he got 15 games in high A, 6 games in double A. So they're going to keep that positional flexibility, and that's going to make it more valuable. You saw David Fry a couple years ago with the Guardians have a lot of success being able to be a backup catcher, but also going out and playing some outfield, playing a little bit all over the diamond. If Chris Suero can make it up and he can give you that flexibility, it just adds to your bench. Let's just say Francisco Alvarez has gotten to a point where he is one of your better hitters in a couple of years. Chris Suero can come up and he can give you the flexibility to DH Alvarez some because you have an extra catcher on your roster, so you have more flexibility. But he could also be a guy that's stealing bases for you, playing left field, playing first base. There's a lot that Chris Suero can do The question is going to be, how much can he continue to progress with his power? 3 home runs in the Arizona Fall League. It is a hitter's league, but 3 home runs, hit 2 home runs in the playoffs. That means on the year, if you're combining everything, you look at 16 home runs that he hit in the minors, but you tack on 2 for the playoffs, 3 for the fall league. All of a sudden, that's 21 home runs hit in, let me think, if they played, 4 or 5 playoff games, less than 130 games played so far. So that's a pretty good power output for Suero. Granted, a lot of that came in high A. We'll see what he does next year with a full season in double A. But I really like just the variety of tools that he brings to the table. The Swiss Army knife ability of Chris Suero makes him a fun prospect to follow and someone that's going to be very tough for me to ultimately rank. But these two guys have gotten off to a good start. We'll see if they can continue that throughout the rest of the fall league. I will keep you updated throughout the rest of their time there in the AFL. Final segment today, we're going to talk about Christian Scott. Will Salmon had an interview with him that he wrote about in The Athletic, which gives us a look into his rehab from Tommy John. So we'll talk about that to close out the show in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you're going to get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5, and if it hits, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes watching football even more exciting. We got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel is going to make the game day experience so much better. It's quick, it's easy. It's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, Christian Scott is about a year removed from his elbow procedure, and it was not just Tommy John surgery. He got both Tommy John and the internal brace procedure, and I think this might be how we see a lot of pitchers going through the process where it's not just TJ, it's both, because in the past, you've had some guys who opt for the internal brace procedure and not Tommy John surgery. So that's sort of, from my understanding, building up everything around the ulnar collateral ligament. If that ligament just has a slight tear, they could try to have a brace procedure without completely repairing the UCL. Spencer Strider, I believe, just got the internal brace procedure. Actually didn't really work out for him this past season. Not saying that the surgery is why, but he did not return to his past glory. We'll see if Strider can have a better season in 2026. But Christian Scott got it all done. So they replaced the ligament. They did the internal brace procedure. They basically rebuilt his elbow entirely structurally. And now, theoretically, he should be good for, you would hope, years of a solid throwing arm that hopefully will not run into any more elbow issues. And we'll knock on wood, and who knows what happens. But Christian Scott, you have to remember, was the Mets' top pitching prospect before he went down. We saw him for 9 starts in the 2024 season, pitched to a mid-4s ERA. He was very, very impressive. Even though the overall numbers weren't great, you did see some flashes of brilliance from Christian Scott, and he was going to be a huge part of the Mets' second half plan in 2024, and 2025, you would have figured he would have been a big part of their rotation. Obviously, injuries happened, didn't work out. Now he's pushed all the way back to 2026, but this latest update, as he spoke with Will Salmon, The Athletic, it does paint a pretty picture about where he's at in the rehab process. Says 26, Christian Scott scheduled to throw his final live bullpen session on Tuesday. It would be his 4th time facing batters and his second go around on a 5-day schedule. Typically, pitchers advance to a rehab assignment with a minor league affiliate at this point in their recovery from elbow surgery. With the season over, however, Scott said the plan is to move on to a deload period before ramping things back up in January. The Mets' top pitching prospect at 24, according to Keith Law. Scott hopes to be a full participant in spring training. He says, quote from Scott, "It's going really smoothly. I haven't really had any setbacks or had anything really come up at all. I've looked back at the 9 games I pitched in the big leagues. I know I need to work on to improve my game." He said there's definitely been a happy medium of working on stuff and working on your delivery, but also making sure you're getting and staying healthy. But we are all super confident about where I am right now. Also talked about a change in his changeup. In the past, he was throwing a split finger changeup, but as Christian Scott says, the in zone percentage wasn't good enough. So now he's throwing a more traditional changeup, which in theory will be in the zone a little bit more and will move a little bit better, which should help him against left-handed batters. In 2024, righties had a 532 OPS against Christian Scott. Lefties had a 942 OPS. So that was a real problem for him. If he can figure out that changeup, that should go a long way into having him as a more complete pitcher overall. They're also reporting a little bit of an uptick in velocity. So far in his bullpen sessions, he's been checking in at about 94 miles per hour, which was his average speed in 2024. But at times, he has flashed 96 miles per hour. And they're saying that once he gets into games more consistently, they'll see if that uptick in velocity will actually continue to hold true. But Christian Scott is definitely a part of this rotation plan in 2026. He's not high on the depth chart. I'd probably put him at number maybe 9 right now. I mean, you got definites in the rotation to me: Clay Holmes, David Peterson. Then I would say Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea. Forgot Noel McLean. Noel McLean's at the top of that list. So there's 5. McLean, Peterson, and Holmes, Senga, Manaea. Then you have Brandon Sproat, and you have Jonah Tong. Next up would be Christian Scott. So checking in at number 8. Now, there's every chance the Mets trade for a frontline starter. They might sign a starting pitcher, whether that's a frontline guy, maybe it's more a depth add. Think a Griffin Canning type signing. On yesterday's show, I broke down all the free agent starting pitchers, and I did note a couple guys that would fit that sort of reclamation project type of a signing. So you can go back and listen to that. But the bottom line is if the Mets add 2 starting pitchers this offseason, that's going to knock Christian Scott down to 10th in the depth chart, but he also could use some time in Syracuse. He did not pitch a ton in Syracuse anyway because he pitched so well that he made a quick debut in May. I believe it was May of the 2024 season where he came up. Was it end of May? Looking at the baseball reference right now. Why am I not seeing Christian Scott's debut listed on here? Debut May 4th. So beginning of May actually was, even earlier. And overall, I think he made 9 starts in Syracuse as well as the 9 starts that he made in the big leagues. Let's check that to confirm. Yeah, 9 starts where he pitched to a 2.76 ERA. The year prior, he didn't even make it up to AAA. So there's still things to be worked on. I think Christian Scott would be a long shot to make the team out of camp. But midseason, he could be an option for you. So it's good to know that Christian Scott is on the mend here. And I also think that there is a world where the Mets could get creative with some of their pitchers, where you might see a Christian Scott or a Brandon Sproat in a role in the big leagues where they are not a starting pitcher, but a bulk reliever that might still be able to go and get you 3 or 4 innings out of the pen. We see teams sort of get more creative with their bullpen than the Mets have over the last couple of years. Obviously, the Mets have been very creative when it comes to shuffling arms in and out, but to be able to have someone that holds on to a role as a long man, but more on a schedule, I think that's something that we could see for either Scott or Sproat. Maybe not Jonah Tong. I don't know. Something to me says that Jonah Tong is in AAA until he forces the Mets' hand, and then he's just a starting pitcher in the big leagues. But theoretically, of course, he could fit into a role like that as well. I just think that the Mets have a lot of arms in their stable, and they're going to get innings from a lot of these guys, and I think they could get very quality innings. And this is sort of a new wave that's coming in that hopefully will make the entire process of building out a pitching staff that much easier moving forward, where each offseason it's not, all right, let's rebuild the whole thing through free agency. I don't think they're going to do that this offseason. I really don't, despite the fact that the starting rotation is why the Mets fell off a cliff last year. I still think that at this point, they have enough depth that they don't have to be overreactionary to what happened in the 2025 season. And they just have to go out and get an ace, as we've talked about time and again. But Christian Scott, it's going to be great to see him get back on the mound, see what he can do this season. And hopefully by 2027, you could have all these guys potentially as regular contributors to this rotation. I mean, there's every chance that when David Peterson enters free agency, you have a lot of guys that can backfill. Clay Holmes might opt out of his contract. He might be out of the picture. You could see a real shifting of the tides here for the Mets rotation over the next couple of years. And I think they have a lot of really intriguing arms to do so. And again, there's every chance that some of these guys may end up having to go to the bullpen just out of necessity with a lack of spots in the rotation. And that could just mean arms that end up really flourishing in the pen and help you in that regard. So good news on Scott. Good news on watching Suero and Morabito tear out the Arizona Fall League. I will keep tabs on all the top prospects throughout the winter and give you a lot of updates on the Met system. I am going to keep on working on my top 20, and maybe we will start to unveil some of that list starting next week. That's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Really appreciate all of you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you want to be Locked On Mets Insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets.